I have this thing I wanted to show you too, but I can't. It's not working right now. Let me see.
According to the pop-up, we're live,
Oh,
Scott.
are we live? Oh my goodness.
Seems so, yeah.
Okay, let's pretend like we just went live. Oh, hello. I didn't see you
Hey,
there.
hi, Scott.
How's it going, Jan?
Really good, actually. The weather's back to
So
being nice.
it's great. Thanks for hanging out. It's Windows Wednesday. Kayla's having a little bit of a challenge with her machine right now, so she will probably pop in and out as she figures that out. But we are here with Jan De Dobbeleer, who is the lead of Oh My Posh. And I wore my Oh My ZSH t-shirt to honor our. And are you still there? If we have
I'm
technical
still
trouble.
here.
All right, cool.
I'm still
So
here.
you know that I'm a huge fan of a good-looking terminal. Let's see if Kayla can bring my terminal up and see how ridiculous and colorful it is right now because I've splashed a ton of stuff all over it. And it was you and your open source project that allowed me to make it this garish.
Yeah.
Some people find this to be too much. They like a nice green terminal, nice basic terminal, but I'm having a ton of fun with it. How popular are you seeing Oh My Posh right now? Are people just discovering it every day?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, actually. I've been tracking this since the beginning. I initially only on PowerShell. I think we're now the one that I can track, because I can't track every download and installation. The one that I can is in the millions for the
Wow.
PowerShell module, which has been around since quite a while, a couple of years. And now that we also moved to Winget, Scoop, Chocolatey, Homebrew, even because we're cross-platform, it's a little difficult to track. But looking at the interaction with the community, I'd say it's still pretty active. So yeah.
So people, actually, I'm realizing as I turn. This is a funny thing about live TV. I don't think I mentioned this to you before. You'll notice that my screen is over here, and I point this direction. So sometimes I have a challenge. So I'm going to flip myself because I want to be able to point to this. That will be over here.
There you go.
Isn't that better? And I can go like that. So I think
That's a
that looks
lot
nice.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
nice.
pretty cool. Well done.
So, a lot of people get confused about a prompt versus a shell. And here I am in PowerShell on Windows, and here I am in Ubuntu, also on Windows, different shell, but I still have Oh My Posh. How is
Yeah.
that possible?
Well, in all honesty, every shelf, almost any shell, has a way to override what it ships as a default prompt.
Hmm.
If you look at ZSH, Bash, they use this almost the same concept. They have an environment variable that you can set to put whatever you would like. You could even just hard code it, doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
And what we do for each and every of these shells in your terminal is
Hmm.
actually hook into those functions or variables and replace it with what we create, which is only just a string that your shell and terminal can interpret, so that it knows, okay, there's this color, that's the background color, that's the foreground color, that's this icon, that. So it's all the only thing we do to make it really simple, which in reality isn't the case, but that's what it is we just populate or override it with our custom string, and then you see a pretty prompt appear on your terminal.
Okay. And I noticed that there's a lot going on with these glyphs. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple of small painting issues you can see here where this is black and this is transparent, but for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, it's gorgeous, and we see people doing a lot of really, really cool stuff. Was that possible before Windows Terminal?
Yes, at least on Windows it was possible. We had a terminal emulator before. Konemu was the name. If I pronounce that
Yeah,
wrong, I'm sorry.
Conemu. Yeah.
Kanemu, that was the one which supported colors, because you need to 5, 6 colors enabled in your shell and your terminal. That one did it, so it had all of the bells and whistles. Still a really good one, to be honest.
No, there's
So
actually a whole community of third-party
yes,
terminals. Conemu is a great one that people should check
yeah.
out.
And that's the oldest one. I think the most popular one, at least the one that's been around for quite a while. There are some cross-platform terminals nowadays too, like Hyper, which is fully JavaScript based. Also pretty popular, very extensible too. But now with Windows Terminal on Windows, which I never really would have expected, so that's an amazing evolution. I have to say, it's amazing to see that being there and being so supported from the Microsoft side.
Yeah, it's cool. So the folks here at ConEmu, at Hyper, they all say this, that ConEmu is not a shell. So we have, again, this confusion or this lack of clarity around, there's the console whose job it is to paint stuff. There's
Yeah.
the shell whose job it is to interpret input and give you back output. And then there's the prompt. So for example, on the right-hand side here in Ubuntu, you can see that last line there. This is Ubuntu specific, not PowerShell. Is that
Correct.
the moment that Oh My Posh jumps in and makes it makes its connection?
So I have to be honest here, because initially we did things differently to actually render your prompt. This is something we got inspiration from Starship, which is another very cross-platform prompt that people might know, and they actually have implemented this pattern. Some of the people using Oh My Posh pointed to that and said that's actually pretty smart, and it is. So we do it the same way. So the only thing we do is we need to know which shell we are actually running in at the time, so that we can also set everything up correctly for you. So in this case, indeed, it's Bash. Oh My Posh knows this, has this configuration built in, and it can just render it. That's why we eval it. So we evaluate the settings so they actually get applied in your shell during that session. So as soon as you start it, that's the first thing we do. We bootstrap basically your prompt at that point in time, and then it keeps on working, which is interesting because it allows us to extend everything without anyone having to adjust their configuration for Oh My Posh, because it's part of the executable. So it will always work.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that's worth noting here is that while this is not a best practice, I would argue that this is probably a bad idea. You'll notice that I'm on my Ubuntu machine, and I'm loading my Oh My Posh configuration off of my OneDrive. This mount point here, the fact that I'm using the Windows, I'm sharing the same Oh My Posh file, that adds a couple of seconds to my initial loading of my prompt. It's not bad, but I'm doing it consciously. People should keep their Oh My Posh file on the Linux file system. Would you agree?
Yes, and there is an interesting caveat there that people might need to be aware of. Is in WSL2, if you try to use, suppose you're on Bash, but your Git repository lives on Windows, on the Windows file system, so you navigate to it the same way you're actually calling your configuration now. Oh My Posh will be slower because it will actually invoke certain executables to gather information like Git and others, and they are known to be slower on the Windows file system from inside WSL2, which didn't happen in WSL1. So it's a new thing. So there are a lot of improvements in WSL2, but this is one of the things that we noticed that people just reported. So it's always interesting to separate them really well. Also using the same, because theoretically you could use the same Oh My Posh executable on Windows and on your Linux setup in the WSL2, but that's not advised because it is actually slower. So that's the only thing you would duplicate.
Yeah, so I'm finding it to be acceptable for me, but I think that the point I'm hearing you say is that, do things consciously. Be aware when you do things. And if you're not happy with the perf, there are very likely good reasons for that.
Exactly. And also depends on how busy or how much work Oh My Posh needs to do to render your prompt at the time, which has a huge impact on, rendering time, if you would like to call it like that. So it's a trade-off, right? Convenience over speed and efficiency. So you just need to be aware of it. But we have these conversations quite often with people on helping them understand, okay, why is this happening? And for some elements, if we can work around it, we find a workaround.
Yeah, I have found it to be not a problem for me. And the convenience that I like of this is by having it on a OneDrive or a Dropbox or a shared drive. I'm getting the updates automatically. Another easy way to do that is to check your Oh My Posh file into Git and then just pull it down locally, which works great as well.
Yeah, there are some really good dot files tooling out there that allows you to just edit and then share it cross device or location. It's interesting. That's what I do. And you can keep them consistently. It's the same principle as using OneDrive, but then leveraging Git other than something else.
Good point. So here is my main prompt. This is the one that I'm in most of the time. And one of the things that makes me happy, and folks can check it out on YouTube if they want, is this lovely Night Scout segment here. So I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I called you one day and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could have another bit of status information in there? Because you can put your memory, your CPU, your Kubernetes, your you can put any status that makes you happy. You can make a segment in Oh My Posh. So I said blood sugar. That's the move. And we live coded in Go a Night Scout. Night Scout is an open source diabetes management system segment. And I've seen some pull requests from the community. I am not the only user. I thought maybe I'd be the only person who thought this was cool, but in fact, a lot of people think this is cool.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it got some traction. But people have been submitting their own custom segments for ever since the beginning, because there's so many use cases that I look at this from my point of view. I have my world, my little bubble, and I need certain things to make me happy. And others need other things to make them happy. And there's some overlap, obviously. But we've seen so many contribution over the past year and a half that really grew everything significantly. And the last two ones, because you can see them right now, is someone is actually adding segments for all of the functionality when you do SAP development. So Cloud Foundry is up there, but he basically wrote 5 segments, and we're adding them one by one so that we can also review them. But it's interesting. And this one also, like Windows Registry key, it's I have no use case for that, but there you go. You can.
Well, and one of the things that's funny about the Windows Registry key one that I think is fun and is anything that's in the registry that's getting regularly updated. It could be a they call it a poor person's integration, right? So if I had an external service or something that was updating things in the registry, I could use that as a remote procedure call to do some out-of-process communication. It might not necessarily be efficient, but I could be poking data into the registry and having that data be presented in Oh My Posh.
For sure.
So the question is then, if this data is coming from some external place, every time I push enter, is that updating? Because you notice there was a little bit of a pause there, and my blood sugar went down, but now it's quite fast again. Yeah. So how often is this getting updated, and how do you keep control of that?
Well, that depends on the configuration. So we noticed that if we do live calls for everything, it doesn't really matter what we fetch, but you know that sometimes fetching information can take time. It's also an external factor, so you're not in control per se. So what we did is, if it's not relevant to update on every time, you can basically add an interval that says just fetch this every 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and it's okay, or 10 minutes, maybe an hour, depends on the context. Pretty sure you won't be looking for the weather every 5 minutes. That makes little to no sense. But if you have that updated every 2 hours, for example, that might be sufficient. So it keeps your prompt really fast, and all of these things can be driven and adjusted from the configuration.
Yeah. Kayla, you made it back.
I did.
Cool. Thanks for hanging out. I know that you had to reboot there to get
I did. Up. It's been a rough morning, so I'm excited to see your prompt looking all colorful.
Yeah, it's cool. So we were just talking about how I can go over to Ubuntu in WSL and I can see the exact same prompt.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go and look at my Vim, my bash RC rather, at the very bottom, we see this shell bash with this wonderful eval command. And you saw that little hiccup there. You saw how that took about 2 seconds, 3 seconds to start. That's because I'm hosting that Oh My Posh on Mount C. So I had to start up and then connect and then do that evaluation. So I'm thinking about moving my Oh My Posh to a Git repository and then having that local, and that'll start up a lot faster and save me a couple of seconds.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that might be cool is going through possibly that JSON file that you have of your theme, and then maybe add some segments to it, or talk about how
good
to
point.
customize the prompt.
So it's in my OneDrive. So let's get out of here and let's go check out my OneDrive. I'll get it from another monitor. I have to remember if it is, here it is. All right, let's bring up Visual Studio Code and we'll pull it over here. And we'll bring over this file here. So let's talk about that file. And let me just mark that as trusted. And we'll go ahead and make this larger.
Cool.
Cool. All right. So what are we looking at, Jan?
So this is everything that you can influence and control to tell Oh My Posh how to render that nice little prompt that you have, ranging from colors to behavior to basically anything. So it is constructed in a way that you have some general properties that are global that we just use. For example, final space is something that at the end we add a space, which now could be omitted, but at the time seemed like a good idea. It's pretty pointless nowadays, but it's still there. Console title, you might just want to do something with it, set it specifically. Not every terminal supports that, which is why we make that a setting, because otherwise you get some weird side effects sometimes, as it notifies your terminal that it should do something with it. If it doesn't really listen to that event or can't interpret it, you get an annoying bell sound at times, which is not what you want every time you press enter. So we allow you to configure it based on whatever terminal you use and the support that is available there. And then the actual magic happens with what we call blocks. And a block is just one combination of segments that you either align left or right. And then you can position all of these things correctly. So a block is a combination of segments, and a segment is one specific functionality like .NET, Golang version. Do I have Python files here in my folder? All of these things. So basically all the segments that you can find online, they're in there. So you see the alignment there. So type is prompt. There's also a right aligned prompt, which is one that stays on the same line, but your cursor stays where it is. So suppose you have a left aligned prompt like you do, then you can see one on the right, and it won't be above, it will be on the same line. Right aligned prompts are something that is known in terminals, or at least in shells, for quite a while. PowerShell does not have that functionality natively, but we hacked it in there just for everybody.
Nice.
And also for me.
Yeah, sometimes people like to put the time over on the far
Yes.
right-hand corner, or just like a
Indeed.
little thing. I've noticed,
So-
I've seen your prompt, it almost feels like there's so much coming in from the left and the right that you only have a little space in the middle. I've seen people with long paths, and they might feel initially that their prompt is like too much, like this is too much to see, but you have total control over those blocks. You can see
Yes.
that I've chosen to shorten mine just to make more room, because I like the way it looks.
Yeah. So you have the folder name, which is a setting that you can add to the path, so your stylus folder. We just recently added a new one because we had a style called letter, which just prints the first relevant letter of your directory that you're in, of all of the folders. But then the feedback came like, maybe you twice have a folder that starts with F. So where am I, right? So the latest one that got added was like that, but then the least unique name. So it will just add a letter until it's unique, and then it keeps on building the path to keep it really short, but you can still distinct where you are based on that, which was a pretty cool idea. That also comes from other prompts. So it's not like people invent these things necessarily on their own. There's a lot of functionality out there that people would like to see here because it can be shared across platform, which is nice.
And then this leading diamond and trailing diamond right here, that's this and that. Now, one of the things that I do have to confess that I'm not very good at, even though I've been using Oh My Posh for a very long time, is I don't know why this has an extra space, this plus. See how this has got like a nice right here?
Yeah.
Why do I have this space here? And I find people, trying to tweak these things and getting confused.
Yeah. So
I am there.
So a diamond what I initially did, and there's a historical context around this. I want to make it easy for you to configure everything so that you do not necessarily need to study everything. And we start out with just powerline, and powerline is the sequence that you see on the right side of your prompt. Like everything is attached to each other, and you only have this one style separator. In your case, it's that triangle that's there, and a diamond style segment is like a diamond, so it will always use a leading symbol and a trailing symbol. And then obviously the background of these will always be transparent. So you will get a space by default. Now, if this still works correctly, because I haven't touched this in a while, what we also did is sometimes you would like a different leading diamond, but then still join in the next segments regardless of their style, whether that power line or whatever. So what we did is at one point in time, if you remove a leading diamond, it will also join join everything together on the next one. So you have on, wait, let's see what we have
So
there.
here, okay, so let's think about this. This
So-
is probably the wrong file because this is Oh My Posh v3.
I have
there
a
it is.
V4 with Night Scout. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
And that's power line. I don't know. It would be a good. I don't know what happens if you remove the trailing diamond from the first one. Don't think that's gonna work.
That was it.
There you go. Voila.
Look at that. Look at that.
So it's as easy as that, right?
Oh, see, look isn't that wonderful? I can just make a change, and I can press enter, and I can do whatever I want to really quickly.
Yeah. So if I have to revisit that, because we went through, or architecturally as well under the hood, what that engine, which is basically what all of the logic that we need to correctly render everything, went through quite an evolution. I also learned quite a bit while I was doing that, because it's not like I was a Go expert at the time of creation. It just felt right to do it in Go at one point in time. So we reworked the engine quite a lot. And now we have three styles, Powerline, Diamond, and also Plain. And in theory, anything could be plain. And you can now work with all of the templates underneath to then add all of the same settings there as well. But that makes it a lot more complex for most people. And sometimes you just want to say, okay, I only want this style and it's fine for me. I don't want to lose any time in configuring this more than I should. Then you still can. So we'll always leave that in there.
Kayla might be interested in you explaining this one here. This is kind of cool. There's some logic happening on line 33 there, because my segment here is 83, which is good blood sugar, and it's green. So I've actually got logic that isn't written in Go.
Yep. So initially the request was, why don't we had that already. If you look at Posh Git, who does that already today, you, based on the state of your Git repository, colors can change. We also had that in Oh My Posh v2, where you wanted to quickly see if maybe your repository had files that were changed, or if your remote was out of sync with what you had locally. So the easiest way to do that, obviously, is with colors rather than with icons, because that's very distinguishable. So you can right away see, oh, it's red, or oh, it's purple, or it's green. And you have more than enough information. Initially, all of these things were also part of the logic, but then people could not adjust it easily or extend it easily. So one of the changes, I think near the end of last year, was let's also refactor that a bit architecturally, so that you can change the colors based on whatever context of that specific segment, and then just do whatever you want, right? So you can do that for the background, for the foreground, and you can use the properties of the segment. So you can see that in your case, actually logical. So if, and then greater than, SVG is the value that you're looking for, which or at least the segment provides that. So in the documentation, you can find all of the different elements that a segment also provides to you. So you can play with that and say, maybe if that value is above that, let's use this color, or could be anything.
That .svg is not a Oh My Posh thing. It's a property called serum glucose value. It happens to come back from my API. So you could just think about that as sugar. So, if the sugar value is greater than 150, make it red, or red, green, blue. That'll be more of a whatever red and green together is, right? And then if it's, no, that's yellow. And then if it's less than 60, then it turns red. And then it stays green if it's otherwise.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? And then you
so
see
we're in
our
the
little,
green.
here's our little shot, our little insulin guy. Then the template itself is totally flexible. So if I don't like the little needle guy because I have a needle fear, I can put anything there. And then that can come from any nerd font, any glyph, anything I have available, right? Oh My Posh.
Correct. Yeah. Could also be an emoji if you're into that. Also works.
Oh yeah, emojis.
Yeah. If your terminal can render it, we're all fine. Doesn't
If your
really
terminal
matter.
can render, you're all good. Yeah, because I put in here, we've got the OctoCat, we've got the needle, we got the Visual Studio, and a human heart. What's the story with the human heart? People are freaked out by that regularly, and I leave it there just because it's awesome.
I didn't get that feedback. It's me. I added that there because it's the health of what I'm doing. So if I'm doing something wrong, the heart turns red, and I'm like, oh no, heart attack. Have to revisit that command.
But what's funny about it is that someone was like, why isn't it a red, like happy, friendly cartoon heart? And I'm like, no, it's an anatomically correct human heart.
It's the best thing I saw was, I think a month ago or someone showed their interpretation of that specific segment, which is the exit segment. And it was a coffee mug, and it was full when it was okay, and it was empty when there was an error, which was brilliant. I'm so gonna steal that, but I didn't find the time yet. But it's amazing. So the template really allows you also to work with that. Say, okay, if my exit code is larger than 0, show this icon, else show that icon, which is, you can do a lot of weird things with that if you wanted to. But the coffee mug was a nice one.
Yeah, but the great part is that you can do whatever makes you happy here. And here we can see that it turns kind of a reddish tinge when there's an error, and the prefix can be whatever makes you happy. So Jan and I have decided to stick with the anatomically correct human heart because it's awesome.
Yeah. It's there. It's gonna stay.
I changed mine, and for my theme, I changed the heart to the happy cartoon heart.
Nothing wrong with that.
I wasn't a fan of the anatomic one.
Well, it looks amazing.
There are a lot of heart choices that you can pick from, so that's totally fine with us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Also, Scott, I think your JSON file is missing the link to the schema, which would help a ton when customizing this kind of thing.
Actually, that's a great point. As we get towards the end here, we want to point people back to ohmyposh.dev, where they can go in here and get started and learn about this stuff. I have been using it since version 2. And it's very likely that I have been carrying my JSON file along with me for a long time. So
there you go.
I've never added that schema to the top.
Yeah. So what that does, because it's interesting to know, it especially in Visual Studio Code, it allows autocomplete. And you can also get links to the explanation of each and of every of these elements in there, which is useful, because otherwise, you're just copy pasting things. And it is quite extensive. So there's quite a lot in there, which also keeps growing. And that's
this is super important. And actually, this is great that you mentioned that, Kayla, because I remember when we added it into Windows Terminal settings, which also has a settings.json, and we both noticed how much better that was. So here, as soon as I open up the quotes, I get, as you see, autocomplete, and as you mentioned, Jan, links to the docs directly from VS. So most people will get that automatically if they haven't been carrying their JSON files around like I have for the last 10 years. But that's super cool. It's really fun to configure your prompt. It's not hard to do, and the installation is just easier than ever. And it's really important to point out that on Windows, you can do this really anywhere, can't you? You can do it in PowerShell. We can do it with Winget really, really easily. Scoop, Chocolate, you support basically everything.
Yep.
Here we go. Replace your existing prompt. I think we're getting towards the end here, but I understand that there's no support for Windows, the kind of DOS but not DOS, but you somehow figured it out.
Well, me is a bit of a stretch. I was pointed in the right
You were pointed?
direction by
Okay.
some smart people.
Yeah.
So there's a tool called C-Link, which is still in active development. There are two specific versions. Please use the one in the that's also in the documentation so that you
Mhm.
end up right. It's basically like read line, but then for the command prompt, and also allows you to change your prompt, which by default the command, it actually allows you, but you cannot make it dynamic. So it's a fixed string that you can add and then maybe change the path or other properties, but not a lot. So I was struggling with that quite a lot, and then someone pointed me in that direction.
Mhm.
And it works magically, and it is fully support. It has all of the features.
Wow.
It has more features than Fish or New Shell. So who are more relatively new kids on the block in that regard. But PowerShell, CMD, Bash, ZSH, they all have almost all full support. PowerShell is the one with the most features. Like secondary prompt, transient prompt is also in there. And as of late, also line error that can also be displayed. So if you type a command
Mhm.
and it is wrong, because PowerShell can, or at least PS Readline can interpret it, Oh My Posh can now also show that to you. But
Very
it
cool.
requires additional configuration, obviously. But that's been added in, I think, the last weeks. Also because someone pointed me in the right direction, because that documentation wasn't readily available.
All right. Well, we're at the end of the half an hour. Thank you so much for staying up. I know it's in the evening dinner time for you. We appreciate you. Congratulations on your GitHub Star Award, and I hope people continue
Thank
to
you.
support this great open source project because you're doing this out of love. You're not
True.
getting rich on this, but
Nope.
we are getting rich because our prompts look amazing. And every single day it is a joy. So I would encourage our friends that are listening to go check out Oh My Posh, get involved in the community, write your own segment, and have all kinds of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jan, for hanging out with us
You're
today.
welcome. My
Kayla?
pleasure.
Thanks.
Sorry about your computer. We'll have to figure. We're gonna build you a desktop. I think this laptop
I'm
thing is not the
ready.
move. Let's do
I
it.
know. I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. It's
All right.
Windows
Thank
Wednesday,
you.
everybody. Bye.
See ya.